All right, welcome everybody. We are involved here in a community conversation on the fight for democracy, and we're going to be exploring what keeps us up at night, what those issues that make our lives difficult and why those issues make it imperative that we vote and that we enter into this fight for our democracy. And I'm Joan Van Becelaere, and I'm the Executive Director for Unitarian Universalist Justice Ohio. And I'm also with the Nonpartisan Ohio Voter Outreach Committee, which you're going to be hearing more of. And Susan, you want to introduce yourself?
I am the founder and Executive Director of Crazy Faith Ministries, and I also work with Joan on this voting project, and I also work with the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference and African American Ministers for Social Justice, so I'm kind of all over the place.
We're going to start today with just a very small centering quote by Howard Thurman, the theologian, who said, "Do not be silent, for there is no limit to the power that may be released through you." And that's something to keep in mind as we move through our slides and our presentation today. There is no limit to that power. So let me tell you why we're here. We're going to talk about what keeps us up at night. We're going to talk about the reality of voter suppression and the threat that it's presenting to our democracy now and to our elections. We're going to help you check your registration status today. We're going to do that either online or on your cell phone. And then at the end, we're going to ask you to volunteer to help inform others, to help others register, to support voter turnout, despite the limitations that we have from the pandemic here. And we do this for safe and fair elections. So that's why we're here. Susan?
Okay. And well, I'm glad you're here too. This is a very critical election. And as I'm looking through your comments, and I've looked through other people's comments, because we've done a couple of these, everybody is saying, well, not everybody, but enough people are saying that this election is critical for a number of different reasons. We're concerned because a lot of people don't vote, will not vote for a number of reasons, including they don't believe that their vote will count, or because they haven't registered, or because they find out at the last minute that their registration is incorrect. And people are disenchanted with the system. They're just disenchanted. And so at this point in time, we can't afford for any of those reasons to keep people at home. I had a conversation with somebody who's a Bernie supporter, and she was angry that it doesn't look like, who knows what's going to happen, because everything is so up in the air, but it doesn't look like Bernie is going to be the presumptive Democratic nominee. And she was mad. She said, "I'm not going to vote." And I just lost it. I was polite, but I really did lose it. And I thought, well, I wanted to come back at her in a way that wouldn't turn her off, but would make her think. And so even though I was steaming, I said, if Bernie, and I didn't particularly like Bernie because he was always yelling. I just didn't understand all of that all of the time, but I thought his principles were good, and I thought that he's been consistent, but personal preference. But I said, if Bernie Sanders was on the ballot, if he were to become the nominee, I would vote for him, because not voting for him, for me, means that I'm as a vote for the president. And even though this is a nonpartisan, I'm not speaking on behalf of you the vote, or Ohio votes, or anything. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I don't want the president who's in office to be president again. So I think that there have to be reasons for people to understand why their vote is important and why not voting is important. So Joan and I, next slide. So Joan and I had a conversation, and you can go to the next slide. And we were talking about how going door to door is good, but it may not be sufficient, because sometimes people will register if you come to their door, and they will, fill out the form because they want you to get off of their porch and out of their lives. So we wanted to have these conversations, and we want to train other people to do these conversations because we believe that face-to-face contact is really important. We want to have conversations because we want people to understand that it's not just a presidential election, but that it is a local election as well. We need for people to understand that all politics is local, so that even though they're voting for whoever's going to be in the White House, they are also voting for the judges and the prosecutors, the city council persons, the state lawmakers, school levies, and all of those issues that affect us where we live. I was on another call last night, and we were talking. An advocate was talking about how she was talking with somebody in Michigan, asking if she knew who a certain person was. It happened to be their state senator, or their senator from Michigan to Washington, D.C., but she didn't know who he was. So there's so much education that we have to do. If they don't know who their national representatives are, it's a sure thing they probably won't know who their state representatives are. So the conversations help us to get into some of that, because people really just don't know a whole lot of things. You can go on to the next slide, Joan. And so we say to people, we want you to understand that all politics is local. All of it is local. It won't make any difference who the president is if your state and local officials vote against your interests. And that is a point we really have to drive home. In my community, I talk to people about, there's a lot of, mass incarceration is a major problem and reality in our society. But the fact of the matter is that many people are affected by it. So when people say, oh, I don't want to vote, and I said, well, let's talk about, the fact that you have power. What we're trying to do is make people understand that they do have power. And so I asked people, is anybody in your family in jail? And in a lot of instances in some of the communities I go to, they'll say yes. I said, well, do you remember who arrested your let's say it's your father? Do you remember who the prosecutor was? Yep. Do you remember who the sheriff was? Yep. Do you remember? And it's amazing how they know the names of all of those people. And so then I say, you have the power to vote them out. And they look at you, like you're telling them like you can walk to the moon. People don't understand how much power they have. We the people is an intentional phrase, and we really do have the power. So we tell people that they have power, that all politics is local, and really, if they want to affect change, they really have to stand on or start at the local level. Next slide. We have to have people in office who will have enough of our interests at heart to be able to stand up against the federal powers if that comes to be an issue, which sometimes it very much is, like now. So Joan and I were talking about the things that keep you up at night. The question is, and we ask this intentionally, what keeps you up at night? For instance, last night I was worried that it woke me up at like 3 this morning because I planted some flowers the other day, and we had a frost last night that kept me up. But there are other things that keep people up at night. I mean, really important things, like, am I going to be able to pay my rent? Am I going to be able to pay, for healthcare? I think I have the coronavirus and I can't risk going to the doctor because I can't miss a day of work. What am I going to do? If I get sick, who's going to take care of my children? I don't have enough money to feed my family, but my little girl also needs a medicine. What am I going to do? How am I going to, if I get sick and I live in a rural area, where am I going to go to get help? Because a lot of rural areas don't have hospitals. There's so many things. I have a woman friend who hasn't had a paycheck since early March, and she's afraid she's going to be evicted. So there are things that keep people up at night in the best of times. And I think in the worst of times, there are even more things that keep us up at night. So Joan and I thought that it would be a good thing to have conversations with people and ask them that question: what keeps you up at night? If I were to just throw out that question right now, just very quickly, anybody, what keeps you up at night? 1 or 2 words, anybody?
You can put it in the chat or unmute yourself and speak up. Global warming, says Eileen.
Global warming, okay.
Mass incarceration.
Okay.
4 more years of Mr. Trump.
Yeah.
Same as Eileen.
Okay.
Privatization of education.
Okay. Look at that. Look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Climate change.
Mm-hmm. Climate change
Ohio
again.
schools. Yeah.
Cuts to education,
Yeah.
lost levies, Ohio schools, all of that.
So what it means is, and thank you for contributing, because that's very helpful. What that means is when you go in to have conversations with people, it's one of the ways that you get people to begin to talk with you, especially if they don't know you, is they begin to talk about things with which people can resonate. And so if we're, and I, when we started out, I said to Joan, I said, we need to talk to people we know, but we especially need to talk to people whom we do not know, because those are the people who feel most often marginalized and ignored. So we have these Ohio facts, and we're not going to go over all those because we really don't want to keep people on Zoom for 1,400 hours. But we want you to look through that slide and see some of the things that keep us up at night. We have too many people in Ohio who are poor. I really do need to say that, because I work a lot with poor people in general. It just bugs me that there are so many poor people in this country, and this is the wealthiest country in the world. I am bothered by the fact that farmers are throwing away food when so many people now are standing in food lines. So much food is being thrown away. Poverty is just one that really gets to me. The war machine that Patricia raises is very critical, because when all of these bailouts started, these money started to be given, my question was, well, wait a minute, I thought we didn't have enough money. We don't have enough money for the Affordable Care Act. We don't have enough. We do have enough money. What we have been doing is putting money to support the military budget. And what I heard on some report yesterday is that the Army, Navy, military is not the only form of enemy that we have. Clearly, germ warfare is a problem. Clearly, a virus is an enemy. So we have to find out how to and have conversations about where or how we can do or put money in places where it can be effective in such a time as this. So we're not going to go down all of these facts that are up on your screen right now, but we just wanted to get you an idea of the things that are keeping people up at night. Mass incarceration, homelessness, and all of that is just a whole bunch of things. Next slide, Joan. So we listed, I vote even when I don't want to vote. When there's nobody on the ballot that makes me happy, or when I seem pretty distant, or the issues that are on the ballot are pretty distant for me, I vote anyway, because I think it's important. I think it's important that we vote, not only that we understand and teach, that we vote not only for people, but we vote for issues. We have to let people know that there are two things that are very important for us. We are the arbiters of our own destiny. And so we have to do it. But things are stopping us. So, like not believing in the system, like not believing that your vote counts. But it is our presence and our vote that in doing that we make our lives and our communities better. You can go to the next slide, Joan. So we're going to talk about voter suppression. That's the area I'm working most in this election cycle. But I wonder, and you can do it in the chat box, do you think, yes or no, that there is much voter suppression in Ohio? Yes or no? You can put it in the chat box. Yes, Marge, yes. Yes, the chair, yep. Don't know. Okay, yes, don't know.
Yep.
Okay.
Verging voter rolls, yep.
Yep. Huge, good.
Huge, okay.
This is good. We can go to the next slide. We asked that question because voter suppression is a tool. It's been a tool forever. Sometimes I get, as I'm watching the people who are dying from this coronavirus, I'm wondering how that's going to affect the election. And I've gotten kind of cynical. If the majority of people in senior citizens homes vote Democrat, and they're dying, I wonder how it's going to affect the election. And I have enough knowledge of how sophisticated the planning is for these election cycles that I don't put that past You know, some of the people there's an article that was in the Atlantic magazine that I can share if anybody wants it. But since 2010, 24 states have implemented new restrictions on voting. And I think you heard the president say that if people uh, had mail-in votes, and a Republican would never win another election. And I've heard or read in conversations that people think that if, you know, we let too many Black people vote, then Republicans will never win. It's just crazy. But there are a lot of restrictions being put in place to keep certain people from voting. Ohio and Georgia have these use it or lose it laws, which purges people from voting if they haven't participated in an election within a set period. And they'll say, well, this is very fair because we send out postcards and we ask people if, you know, if they voted, we do it. And they have like a number of postcards maybe that they send out. But a lot of people to whom those postcards are sent are transient. They have voted, but they are living in different locations because that's the way their lives go. And the people who do these postcards know that that is absolutely the case. And so that's a big thing, you know, purging by postcard and purging because people's signatures don't match, or purging for any number of reasons. So we're seeing a national effort by conservative forces to restrict voting rights. And it really ticks me off. But it's playing out in Ohio, and it's playing out all across the country. Next slide, please. So we're going to show you this video. How many of you, and again, we're talking via the chat, but we'll talk, you know, person to person soon. How many of you know what happened in Wisconsin for their primary? And did it make you, what did it make you think? One word: mad, you know, indifferent, confused, what? What happened in Wisconsin for their primary? Angry, furious, manipulated, pissed, mad, furious. Okay. That's good. We want people to care about these things, and that's good. So we're going to show you this brief video that that has to do with what happened in Wisconsin.
We expect more cases, we expect more deaths, we expect more tragedies. I cannot in good conscience allow any types of gathering that would further the spread of this disease and to put more lives at risk. There's not a sufficiently safe way to administer in-person voting tomorrow.
I am 65. I'm a type 2 diabetic. I've had heart issues. I mean, those are the risk factors they say can make it more serious.
I actually think that it's suppressive and dangerously irresponsible that the legislature hasn't either delayed the election or made it all mail-in ballot. I had a moment where I just really was not sure that I could do this. I woke up crying.
We have some best practices thing set up in there with a plexiglass shield between the voter and the poll workers. We're going to have masks available, gloves available, hand sanitizer, but it's still going to be something that is a risk. We normally use 13 different polling locations. We normally have 300 poll workers to staff those locations. As of 10 days ago, we were down to 40.
I don't know what the last count was, but at one point, at least 40 of the poll workers and voters that verified that they had voted that day came down with the virus.
Right. So that's just, to me, it's inhumane, it's amoral, it's immoral, and that kind of stuff combined with gerrymandering. We're just not quite sure what kind of effect it's going to have on the general election in November. But Ohio purges a lot of people. 267,000 registrations were purged in January 2019. A lot of people don't think that it could happen to them. But when some of my people and I were out registering people for the 2018 midterms, and we said, do you want to vote? No. Are you registered to vote? Yeah. Because they wanted us to leave them alone. And we said, okay. Can we just check? Can we just check while you're here? Because we had our laptops and our iPads with us. And so, they humored us. And they let us, we led them to the site where they could check. And I'm going to tell you what, there were a whole lot of people who had been purged who didn't know it. They did not know it. And it made them very, very angry. And so we gave them the form, they filled it out right there. And then we made a pact and said, okay, can you make, promises that you'll go home and you'll have everybody in your family check their registration and have them to ask their family and their friends, because the only way we, the people, have power is that if we expand our base. And so when people find out that they have been purged, they are not happy. The second purge was planned for September 2019. Now remember, the 267,000 was in January. So a second purge was planned for 2019, but some really good reporting by reporters from the Dispatch that identified more than 1,600 active voters who were incorrectly marked for purging, and some had voted in the 2018 election. It's just awful what people are doing. And then in Columbus, the election officials had identified another 1,100 people. So almost 3,000 more people were slated to be purged. So when that story came out, the purge was dropped, and Ohio Secretary of State LaRose said, oh yeah, that's bad, that's horrible, that Ohio's county by county voter registration leads to a mess of inconsistent data, and he made it seem like he was super concerned and they were going to do something about it. He did nothing about it. So that brings us back to the fact that the power rests in us, the unelected people, the people who put them in office. The power rests with us. Next slide, please. So now we're going to show this video, which Joan and I think is very important. It's very, very, it illuminates a lot of things that we could never really explain with our mouths. And what I hope you'll do as you watch is jot down some notes, jot down things that you want to remember, jot down things that you want to look up more, so that when you are in conversations with people, you can help people understand the gravity of the situation that we're in. This happened in Georgia, but things like this are happening in Ohio as well. Okay, Joan.
Georgia's tight race for governor is getting national attention.
Brian Kemp is not only the Republican gubernatorial nominee, he's Georgia's Secretary of State.
Stacey Abrams looking to make history by becoming the nation's first female African-American governor.
Volunteers are picking up phones and knocking on doors across the state.
Come in and register to vote.
We are very excited to register as many people as we possibly can.
What do we want?
Register to vote!
When do we want it?
Today!
I come as one, but I stand as 10,000.
Pull back that veneer. And you see something really rotten happening. It's almost like termites coming in. They're in the wood. They're eating the wood away. And you don't even realize your house is getting ready to collapse until it's almost too late.
We have a historic decision today, striking down a key part of the Voting Rights Act, a civil rights law passed back in 1965.
The Supreme Court essentially said racism is over, and these communities don't need to pre-clear these changes anymore.
This decision leaves virtually unprotected minority voters in communities all over this country.
We are witnessing a tidal wave of voter suppression around the country.
If you look at Alabama,
Arkansas,
North Carolina,
Ohio,
Kansas,
North Dakota,
Michigan, Wisconsin,
and Georgia, which is becoming ground zero.
We've got to understand, this isn't a Klan cross burning. This stuff is very bureaucratic, it's very mundane, it's very routine, but it is lethal.
For spacious skies, for amber waves of
and majesty above a fruited plain.
My name is Bobby Jenkins. I live in Cuthbert, Georgia. The county is Randolph County. I spent about almost 35 years in education. I was superintendent of schools.
My name is Loretta Brown. I live in Morgan, Georgia, and I grew up in Randolph County. I am the state advisor for the Georgia NAACP Youth and College Division.
My name is Lewis Brooks. I live in Thomaston, Georgia, Upson County, and I've been living here my whole 89 years, except the 2 years I spent in service in Korea. In I believe it was 55 or 56, that's when they started to letting black people vote in Upson County. When I went to register to vote, it was tough. They asked me all kind of questions to try to keep me from registering. I passed the test. Once I got my voter right, I decided I wasn't going to let anything stop me from voting. Because I used to walk. You go up the street here, across the next street over there, I walk over there and walk back and vote. And I didn't miss the voting, except when they closed the poll. I'm a citizen. It's my right to vote and speak my opinion.
I saw this ad saying that there was a proposal to close 7 of the 9 precincts in Randolph County. I said, what?
Then they put it in the papers that they was closing polls, costing too much money.
First of all, Randolph is a poor county. Just to give you an example of what it would mean, there's a community benevolence a little north of town. Had that precinct been closed, some of those individuals would have to go 30 miles round trip in order to vote. It would have been a terrible hardship on our poor, on our elderly, and on those who are least able to afford transportation.
Now I got disabled and I couldn't do no driving. I know I couldn't afford to go that far to vote. This was in a black neighborhood. It made me feel like they were closing down to keep the black people from voting, because most black people vote Democrat. They only closed one white voting place. Everybody from out here in the black side go clean over there to the white section to vote. We're human, and we have our rights to vote just like anybody else.
Voters in Randolph County, Georgia are outraged.
Randolph County residents expressed their concerns with the Board of Elections.
Our citizens turned out in full force. They were behind us 100%, trying to keep those polling places open.
Convenience of the voter. You all are not considering that at all.
There's no disenfranchisement for the African Americans.
I went to the meeting, find out that they were trying to close 7 of the precincts.
Got to stand up. You cannot allow this to continue.
They gave a couple of reasons, saying it would save money. The other one was that several of the polling places were not ADA compliant. The thing that was so ironic is we voted that way in May. You know, they weren't any worse in November than they were in May.
It will be impossible for rural voters without vehicles to vote on election day. It will be impossible for them. They will have to walk 3.5 hours just to get from one of these polling places to Cuthbert and Shellman.
We did petition to keep it open. Pressure from the residents, civil rights organization, speaking up, speaking out.
They called the meeting to order, and they only had one motion. They voted to keep them open.
The news of what was happening here in Randolph County went worldwide.
The incident that we experienced threw the spotlight on everything else that had been going on. You know, we find out that in the state of Georgia, there were over 200 other polling places had been closed.
If you move a poll 4 miles, it is the equivalent of a 20% drop in black voter turnout. That's what shutting down these polls mean.
With 2 months to go, the race is heating up in Georgia.
Stacey Abrams' campaign feel they have the momentum behind them, and many of the posts we've seen so far support that.
You know, the Democrats are working hard, registering all these minority voters, and if they can do that, they can win these elections in November.
There's no law in Georgia that requires the Secretary of State to process voter registration forms on a particular timeline.
Kemp withheld putting the names of thousands on the voter registration list until after the election.
80% were African Americans, Latinos, and Asian Americans.
Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on.
This is Fulton County.
Money for the goes at bay.
Linda Marshall is my name.
Eyes on the prize. Hold on.
Most of my professional career has been in public service of one kind or another, as a teacher, as a government worker. I moved here in August of this year, but because of my emphasis on always being registered and always having the ability to vote, I did that almost immediately when I got here. Of course, I also knew the importance of the upcoming election, and I wanted to be a part of that history.
Keep your eyes on.
It got closer and closer and closer to the election, and I was getting a little bit concerned, so I called the Secretary of State's office. My name is not on the roll. They can't tell me where it is. So all of that paperwork that I sent in, I don't know where it is. I'm 65, and for the first time, I did not get a chance to vote in a very close election of historic importance and proportion. Welcome to Georgia.
Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize.
The midterm election in Georgia is only 29 days away.
Civil rights leaders say Kemp is illegally removing people from Georgia's voters list.
Republican Brian Kemp has already gotten the backing of our current president.
Thousands are purged from Georgia's voting rolls.
Purged from Georgia's voting rolls. 890 had no idea they could vote.
Other states use the same
over who's been removed from the voter roll.
There has been instance after instance of unlawful voter purging. States are removing voters, many of whom have actually been found to have been eligible but were unlawfully removed from the rolls.
I received the purge notice. So I open it up and I read the first sentence. Now I, along with 380,000 Georgians, received the same notice.
That's an especially pernicious way to prevent people from voting, because once you register to vote, you would think that you should be able to remain on the rolls. And once you're removed from the rolls, you cannot vote.
I went out and got the mail, and there were 2 letters in there. They looked official. You're hereby notified that the City of Thunderbolt has challenged your right to vote. The City of Thunderbolt states that you no longer reside within the municipality. My license is valid, my address is valid, I own this home. Why are you questioning my right to vote?
You know, the purges, they've been going on for decades, maybe over a century in this state.
If you haven't voted in the last few elections, they'll purge you as if you must not be in the state anymore. If you move within the same county, they'll purge you, assuming you're not living in Georgia anymore. If you don't return a postcard from the Secretary of State, they'll purge you, because to them it means you're not a resident at this address. All of these tactics specifically and disproportionately target people of color, poor people, the elderly, all of whom tend to vote for Democrats.
Brian Kemp is notorious for erasing the polls and purging people right before the election deadline.
You have a candidate at the top of the ticket who is responsible for maintaining the integrity of the election.
He needed to have his hands on the levers.
You have an umpire who is also playing in the game.
Less than 20 days away from the midterms now. The race for Georgia's governorship is a toss-up.
Literally is a dead heat.
This governor's race is already one for the history books, but it's also seeing record numbers of requests for absentee ballots, especially from African-American voters.
At a time where we're seeing roughly almost half of the people who've turned in an absentee ballot are people of color, that's a really, really good sign for Stacey Abrams.
We caught them off guard by running such a large-scale program and mailed 1.6 million African Americans an absentee ballot application.
In this midterm election, the absentee ballot requests are even outperforming presidential years. So that is startling and eye-popping and something that we need to dig in on to see what's going on there.
My name is Norman Broderick, and I'm in Powder Springs, Georgia, Cobb County. I did 24 years in the military, deployed to Iraq twice, Bosnia, Saudi Arabia. I voted absentee before when I was deployed. When I was in Iraq the first time, I voted absentee, and when I was in Iraq the second time, I voted absentee. The absentee ballot is a very important tool that exists to allow people, not only just the military, but anybody who happens to be away from their voting station to be able to cast their vote.
My name is Peggy Shu. I'm from Johns Creek, Georgia. I left Georgia for DC in the beginning of October, and before I left, I mailed out my absentee ballot application so that our registrar would send an absentee ballot to my new DC address.
I work at U.S. Army Central, which is located at Shaw Air Force Base in Sumter, South Carolina. I'm away from home during the week. I knew I wasn't going to be able to get back to Georgia to vote. I could only do this absentee. I filled out everything I was supposed to fill out. I sent their documents in. I got confirmation that it was received. And to my surprise, I did not receive my absentee ballot.
I checked my mailbox every day. It was like nearing the end of the month. And so I started calling the voter protection hotline. I called my registrar. I sent emails, and it was really getting close to the election date. And I never received my ballot. The election day came and went, and I wasn't able to vote in the end.
When I contacted my wife and asked her about it, I think it was a couple of days before the election, it came here. And I tried contacting the Georgia Elections Board. I was told they did receive my absentee ballot request. Everything was filled out correctly, but that they mailed it to the wrong address. And she admitted that, yes, they did mess up. It was their fault. But there was nothing I could do about it. It's too late. It's over with, and my vote will not be counted during this election.
It was probably one of the most frustrating things I've ever experienced. After having spent, my entire college career very invested in the political process, it was, I don't know, like a punch to the gut.
it still pisses me off to this day. Being in Baghdad, voting absentee was easier than being 4 hours away trying to vote absentee in South Carolina.
I took to Facebook and, like the millennial activist that I am, I recounted my experience in a Facebook post. I wrote, this is what happened. I wasn't able to vote, and if you had a similar experience, let me know. And my friend from high school, she reached out to me and she said, I also had struggles trying to get my ballot in, voting absentee.
So I submitted an absentee ballot. It came 2 days right before Election Day.
Over the course of 48 hours, we had 40 people. So many people in our immediate Facebook circle knew somebody who had a similar experience to us.
People have requested it like far in advance. Some people just didn't get their vote in.
That was when we really realized that this was not an isolated incident. It was a much bigger issue and a much more deeper rooted sort of phenomenon that was going on statewide.
I did speak with the Board of Elections and he just dismissed it as like a hiccup. And he's like, oh, like, no, you don't really know what you're talking about. 40 cases, not really a hiccup. It's more of like a wake-up call.
Today, we've worked to get answers about the claim that thousands of voters never got the absentee ballots they requested.
Great Tuesday morning, Election Day.
The race between Abrams and Kemp is literally neck and neck.
Their fate is now in the hands of voters.
The day is finally upon us.
The midterm elections are happening.
Voters head to the polls in one of the most intensely fought midterm elections. The race for Georgia's governorship is a toss-up.
I live in the South. I'm always worried about Election Day.
Have a great morning and go vote.
Oh yeah, gotta go vote today.
Voting started here in Georgia this morning, and if you think hitting the polls early will keep you from getting stuck on long lines, think again.
Voter Protection Hotline, how can I help you?
Voter Protection Hotline, how can I help you?
I've never seen one.
The line hasn't moved in over an hour. The line is running out.
I really thought I was going to be able to run in and run out like I usually do. The first thing I saw was just people everywhere. So we stood there for a while without moving. And then we would inch up. And then we wouldn't move. We had a lot of people with children there, pregnant mothers, elderly people. Some people have medical issues.
I took my son to school that morning, and then I went to vote at Ferguson Elementary, where I vote every election. The line just keeps getting longer. The line was so long through the school and wrapped around the building. The lines was crazy everywhere, all over the county. It was real long. I was in line for 2 hours. I got to the door. That's when they was checking your ID before you go in. And she couldn't find my name. She directed me to go downtown Gwinnett. And I was like, I'm not going to vote. And it was this older lady. She came over and she like held my hand and was like, please go do it. We need this. And I looked in her eyes and said, I will.
Registered somewhere else and they pulled it up in the system. Don't blame my eyes.
About 8 or 9, we started getting the calls about the long lines.
Long lines at the polling stations lead to low voter turnout. The research is just crystal clear on that.
Everyone in the world knew we were going to vote today. And in my neighborhood, there are no power cords. All these dedicated people waiting to vote. This is what we call voter suppression.
People were like upset and angry. I started calling the Secretary of State's office. I was either hung up on, placed on hold. They want people to go home and not vote. I ain't going nowhere. I'm gonna be right here.
The reason they sent me from Ferguson to the downtown Gwinnett was for the provisional vote. So I drove 25 minutes, and then when I got there, it was crowded in there. I waited 45 minutes to find out that's not where I needed to be. She told me that this was the wrong place and that I can go back to Ferguson. I had to call back and redo my schedule. So now the voting not only cut on my time, cut on my money.
When we went in, filled out all the paperwork,
had the ID, took it up to the lady. I had mine in my hand. One hand had hers in the other, because she's legally blind. So we go give it to the lady, and she goes to scan Barbara's ID. Wow. And so she looked up at Barbara. She said, well, Miss Barbara, when was the last time you voted? My sister got strong. I've been voting since I was 18 years old. And I'm 82.
I was disappointed.
She was a little upset. My girl wanted to vote, and they were trying to keep her from voting.
Since I became a citizen, I have not missed an election. I showed up, and a very nice lady, she looked at my ID and said, no, you're not registered. And I said, no, wait a second. Here's my registration card, and showed them that I was registered. And they said, yeah, but your name is Del Rio with a space, but your voter ID says Del Rio one word, and therefore it doesn't match. In the voter registration, my name shows as Del Rio with a space. My ID is Del Rio, no space. That was a non-match. I said, this is not legal and I need to be allowed to vote. After much discussion, they said to me, this time we'll allow you to vote, but it's a little bit like they're doing me a favor. The right to vote should be something that we should make easier rather than more difficult.
Latinos and Asian Americans are 6 times more likely than white Georgians to be cut from the voter rolls because of exact match, and Black Americans are 8 times more likely to be cut because of exact match.
I have voted in every election, and all of a sudden I'm not there.
Controversy surrounds the state's exact match law that put the registrations of 53,000 voters, most of them African Americans, on hold because of discrepancies in the way their names are spelled in state databases.
People of color have names that are a little bit less typical, and that's where the errors are at their highest. Brian Kemp knows this.
A group of students will not have their voices heard at the polls, at least not in Georgia.
They're turning a bunch of students away over here.
We're showing up here and at the Booker T. Washington location, and their names were not on the actual roll.
The students was being turned away. I talked to over 50 students that morning.
First, they told me I was at the wrong polling station.
They said, you didn't get registered. I was like, what do you mean?
And there was only about 4 voting ballot booths.
They didn't process my registration didn't go through. I walked back to my dorm and said, I guess I just won't vote.
Just before I went to vote, I had been in an African American history class where we were actually talking about voter suppression, about what was it like for people that were going to vote. I filled out a little slip of paper, gave it to the poll workers. They looked up at me and they said, it's coming up in our system as though you're not a citizen of the United States. I just sort of looked at them like they had 2 heads. Like, I'm sorry, I was born in New York, what?
When I got to the front of the line, they informed me that I was registered to vote, but not in Dougherty County. They were telling me that I was registered back home in Winter Robins, where I was from, and I've never voted there. I've never even been registered there.
The thing was that I had brought proof that I was a U.S. citizen. I had with me my driver's license, my passport card, and my Emory student ID, but they would not look at the passport card whatsoever to prove that I was a citizen. I walked out crying. What I learned in history class just hours before, this happened to me in 2018.
I had been through and participated in voter registration drive on campus, within a community. It was just like, wow, after all of this, I'm not gonna be able to vote myself.
Like when I was growing up, voting was a thing. It was an event. And so little me is trailing behind my parents watching them vote.
My parents would take me to the voting polls every time when I was little. I would go in and I would help them fill out the bubbles.
I get a chance to vote, and then you get there and the experience is just terrible, and you have to call your mom and be like, why is it so hard? You never told me it would be this hard.
This was huge for us because Stacey Abrams was actually a Spelman alum. History would have been made, and it would have been made by my Spelman sister.
If there is no one who gets to 50% tonight, Robin, there will be a runoff in December.
We'll find out as the day and evening goes on.
Voter Protection Hotline, how can I help you?
Are they letting you know now? Are you really kidding me?
Old people who can't vote, there's young people who can't vote, there's people in every county who can't vote.
It just created this intense fog of confusion across the state.
Been here for 3 hours, 4 or 5 hour wait. 5 hours.
This is way, way too long for us to stay and vote.
How long have you waited in line here?
About 3.5 hours.
And you decide you can't stand it? You can't take it anymore? Are you going to go home?
I'm hurting out. I'll be back. I got to go take some medicine.
It was really good. The lines weren't too long and everyone was super helpful.
We don't hardly ever have to wait here. It's always a pleasant experience up here.
If you have a fixed resource, an easy way to suppress the vote is to just make that resource unavailable to the people who you don't want to vote. And that's exactly what happened in the 2018 election here in the state of Georgia. In places like North Fulton County, which are wealthy, there were more machines than anyone could ever use. In black neighborhoods, there were a quarter of the number of machines that were needed to service the population.
Lots of people left without voting.
It was people just dropping off when it became 2 hours, 3 hours, 4th hour. It was very heartbreaking.
All it takes is a little walking away at 159 counties to influence an election. A little here, a little there, and then in a race like this, which was so close, there you go.
All night on Twitter, a trending topic, hashtag stay in line.
I had to go and pick my son up. He had to be picked up before 6. I picked my son up and he went with me and sat in the car. And then I went back to Ferguson Elementary. And by this time, the evening crowd is there and the line has tripled. And I was like, oh, there is no way. Just for my one vote, it took me like 6 hours. And I wanted to give up because I promised that elderly lady outside that I would do it.
5 hours, so about 5 hours took me to vote. It sucks the life out of you.
I'd been in people's homes, I'd been in their neighborhoods, I'd held their hands. And so to get to election night and to start hearing more and more stories of voter suppression, to hear more and more from people who were told that they couldn't vote or who were turned away or had to give up because of 4-hour lines, that broke my heart.
Republican Brian Kemp holds a narrow lead over Democrat Stacey Abrams.
Tens of thousands of ballots left to be counted in this election. They were counting provisional ballots for hours.
Provisional ballots are basically placebos. They're being given to voters to kind of shut them up, make them go away.
The next day, I was so excited because they were saying that it was a close race. I was like, oh, let me make sure that my vote count. So I called there, the number that was on the paper that I got from the voting poll. And she go, oh no, they counting every vote. You don't need to call. I called my mom to double check. My mom worked for the poll for 20-some years. And she said, no, that's not true. You call back to make sure the vote count. And someone else says to the phone, and I got the same thing. No, you don't need to call back. We counting all the votes.
We just started discovering so many people voting provisionally. We realized, oh, you voted provisionally, so you might have to come back here the next day and show your ID. Is that something you know? And they're like, no, I already voted. Like, I'm good.
But you have to come back within 3 days with the documentation to prove you are who you say you are. When you have a large working class population that has to punch a clock, that's really tough. You've lost pay from work trying to vote. That's a poll tax.
I wanted to confirm if my vote was counted or not.
All right, what is your last name?
Kimball.
Let's see, there was no participation.
So does that...
You weren't given credit for voting.
My vote was not counted.
It looks like it on election day, yes, ma'am.
No, I thank you. Goodbye.
Last night, my opponent ended her campaign. The election is over, and I'm honored to be Georgia's governor-elect.
I acknowledge that former Secretary of State Brian Kemp will be certified as the victor in the 2018 gubernatorial election. But to watch an elected official baldly pin his hopes for election on the suppression of the people's democratic right to vote has been appalling. This is not a speech of concession. Because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that.
This is systematic. If you look at what has happened across this country in the last 5 years, 40 states have passed some kind of law to make it more difficult for people to vote.
In Arkansas, the Supreme Court upheld a measure requiring voters to show photo ID.
North Carolina, where it targeted African Americans. In Alabama, the governor was shutting down DMVs.
In Ohio.
Kansas, tens of thousands of people were prevented from voting.
Texas allows a concealed gun license to vote, but will not include college IDs.
Indiana, they purged 500,000 voters.
Wisconsin, where a recent photo ID law may have handed the 2016 election to Donald Trump.
We lost 41,000 voters. I think it changed the outcome of the election in the state of Wisconsin.
America. We are not going to let them take from us what our grandparents and parents fought and suffered and died to give us in the first place.
We are here to resist an ID law that is undemocratic, unconstitutional, and immoral.
People are demanding democracy. In Washington, there's a new Native American Voting Rights Act. New Mexico now has same-day voter registration. Colorado, Nevada, Florida, and Arizona all passed laws restoring voting rights to those formerly incarcerated. Indiana blocked a law that would have allowed purging. New York, activism led to an expansive package of voting reforms. Michigan, a ballot initiative to end extreme partisan gerrymandering. And there's national legislation now to restore the Voting Rights Act.
These efforts are being fought in the streets. They are being fought in the city councils. They are being fought in the state legislators.
We belong together. We are all part of the fabric of this country, and we understand what's at stake.
Any voter suppression law is not just about black people. It is about America itself. On my mother's dying bed at 92 years old, former sharecropper, her last words were, "Do not let them take our votes away from us."
We have the power to change this. We are going to vote you out so that we really do have fair and free elections.
So after seeing this video, I just always ask people to say in one word how it has left you feeling. One word. Mm. Mm. These are some good answers. And I'm going to turn this over to Joan in a second. But the feelings of disgust and anger are one level of reaction. The despair and the depression is another level that we have to really fight through. I think being in despair and being depressed keeps a lot of us from doing a lot of things. And if we feel like, nothing I do is going to make a difference. That's the despair slash depression, and it can keep us from moving forward. The one thing I appreciate about being an African American is that we have had nothing but roadblocks in our lives, nothing but roadblocks, and it has made us, I think, a stronger people for it. And so part of our work, maybe our follow-up, will be kind of maybe working with people on our own reactions, how we can take the reactions and the feelings that we have about what's going on, because the more you study, the more you see what's going on, and it is quite depressing. But we have to take that and turn it into the power. That's our power. That's our power. So okay, so I'm gonna thank you for sharing those feelings: frightened, angry, despair, disgusted, all of that. Thank you so much. I'm gonna turn it over to Joan.
Okay. And I see somebody else asked how many of the lawsuits have been resolved. I do not know that. At this point, I don't think any of them have, from what I've seen. Let's unmute ourselves if we want to, or you can type in the chat box. But are there thoughts that you have right now about what we could do to prevent what happened in Georgia and Wisconsin from happening here? Does anybody have some thoughts about that you would want to share?
My question is the ACLU of Ohio involved with, monitoring the Secretary of State's office to make sure that they're not doing this?
As best they can. And that's one of the reasons I found back in 2019 that there were so many people who were registered, who were being purged that shouldn't have been purged, because they were going through the list one name at a time with some other folk. Other questions or other things that you think of?
I wondered why for this latest primary, why they didn't just send out the the mail-in ballots to people, as opposed to sending out postcards saying, or just send out the application for a mail-in ballot is what I'm trying to say, instead of sending out postcards saying you need to request this item. Like, it would have been barely any more paper for them to have just sent the applications to begin with. I understand ballots are individualized and, it's complicated to send, different to different places. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there.
And I did look at that one, believe it or not, and found that it was illegal for the Secretary of State to send an application to people, and the legislature would have had to have included that in their establishment of the guidelines for the primary.
I see. Okay,
yeah,
thank you for that information.
It's awful. Yeah.
It was a deliberate. It's a voter suppressive tactic.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Lori was looking. Yes, the League of Women Voters has also been active in monitoring what's going on around the election, and they're part of the Ohio Voter Rights Coalition, which is part of our voter outreach committee that I'm going to tell you about. So they are part of that for sure. And the voting laws in Ohio need to be changed. We need to work on different processes for the November one to allow a better mail-in ballot. And these are all part of the tactics. So there's lots of reactions online. Anybody else have anything they want to say before I talk a little bit more here? Okay. I want to say just a word about why we need to help people register to vote. I mean, you can say, oh, I register, and the people I know register, and the people in my church register. But why do we need to help other folk register and get to the polls? Because we know that Ohio communities are underrepresented, many of them, in the turnout, and their voices are not being heard in our government, in our democracy. We know that voter registration helps create a more active and engaged citizenry and community because registered voters join neighborhood activities and they contact elected officials and they're active citizens. And I see them coming to the State House when I'm there to testify at a hearing on legislation, and they're there. And most of all, elected officials pay attention to communities that show up to vote, and they look at that. And we want all of our communities to be valued and heard. We don't want any of them to be written off because they had low voter turnout. But we know that registration is not enough. As Susan was saying, you go up to somebody on a doorstep back when we could meet face to face, and you would say, you know, register to vote, and to get you gone and get back to what they're doing, they'd sign, okay, yeah, and they'd sign it up. But it's not enough to just register people. Because in 2018, Ohio only had 50.4% of its registered voters voting. This is abominable. That put us like 29th in the nation. Only 22% of the young adults in Ohio who were registered came out and voted.
God.
This is why we need something more. We need to inform. We need to support. We need to generate enthusiasm. Other states, 64.2% in Minnesota, Colorado, Montana, Wisconsin, Oregon, you know, all were above 61%. So while it's true that a lot of Ohioans remain unregistered and we need to get them registered, we also need to help people learn how important it is to vote and get that enthusiasm going and help them actually get there. And what can we do to help them? Yes, it's a time of pandemic. Yes, many of us in a stay-at-home order, but our committees are coming together already to do a number of things. We phone people about registering. We phone people about voting. We can start with family, friends, coworkers, church people we know, etc. We can get out information about how to vote. You know, the absentee ballot was not an easy thing, but we can help people learn that. And we're developing a little how-to videos right now in our registration committee that will help explain how to vote, no matter how it's changed or what we have to do. We can let people know when the dates are, like the last day to register for the November election is October 5th. We can talk about the issues. We can get information from the Ohio League of Women Voters, which is fabulous stuff, nonpartisan. Share it everywhere. Throw it all over the church. Get it out to people. We can, most of all, we can help people check their registrations by phone or online to make sure they haven't been purged. And yes, I'm talking about people in UU congregations that have been purged. We were doing this just in February when I was training a group of folk when we could do face-to-face. And we found a young adult at First UU Columbus who had registered, about a year ago, and she had already been purged. So don't make any assumptions about who is or is not being purged. She was a young adult and had moved. We can hold online conversations like this one, or someday we maybe could do these face-to-face, which is what our hope was, right? And let people know what's going on. I can help you, train you how to run these conversations yourselves and give you all the equipment. And then, of course, we can register people face-to-face when it's safe. We can drive people to the polls. I mean, there's just a number of different things we can do. So I'm going to ask you to tell me what you commit to do. Talk to somebody about workshop and voting. Check your own registration, and we're going to do all that. We're going to do our own registration checking in just a minute. And volunteer to help reach out to Ohioans. You can be on the Election Protection Committee, the Education Committee, the Registration Committee, the Transport Committee, other forms of support that we have, minority outreach, disabilities outreach, young adult outreach, faith leaders. All of these different subcommittees are part of the Nonpartisan Ohio Voter Outreach Committee. Long name, but great work. And you can be part of that. So is there anybody right now that thinks that they would be willing to do something along these lines? You can raise your hand, you can put a thumb up, or you can chat box or unmute yourself and speak up. Yes, from Beverly. Okay.
I wanted to make you aware that there is a pending Senate Bill 191 that was proposed by a Republican that enables people to ask for an absentee ballot online.
Yes.
And should be talking to our legislators about supporting Senate Bill 191, because now more than ever, you know, we're in this bizarro world where it's possible the entire vote may take place by mail, and we know that the Republicans will fight that tooth and nail.
Yep.
And scream voter fraud. But, you know, what has happened over the last 30 years since Lee Atwater said, I will elect people to any public office I can think of, sewer board, dog catcher, you know, school board, and elevate those people, is that we now have this Republican controlled, you know, world of basically 30 some state legislators. And you have to, the talking point is, oh, look what's happened over the last 30 years. Are you better off? No. Well, you better go vote for Democrats like your life depends on it, because it now most surely does. So, Senate Bill 191, and I'll telegraph the need for people to volunteer. This is a wonderful opportunity for the elderly to do their part. They can sit at home and call people as much as they like, you know, for hours on end, and find out if they're registered, give them information.
That's right.
Encourage them to get an absentee ballot, vote, vote, vote.
Yep.
So mobilize our seniors, and
we're going to be doing training on how you walk somebody through it step by step using either cell phone or online. And there is a group that is marshaling the advocacy for that bill that you're talking about. So if you become part of the committee, there is a subgroup that is working on the advocacy and the messaging and how we're mobilizing people to lay some pressure to make sure that passes.
Great.
So that's another area of help that we need too. Okay, and yes, we have other people willing. All right. Well, I've got a sign up URL on the screen. I have a link from our ujo.org website on our voter advocacy page. You can email me with any questions. And I'm going to send everybody who's registered for this event, who registered on our Action Network form that you filled out, I'm going to send you a letter that's going to have links to the video from our YouTube channel and a sign-up link to volunteer for the voter protection, election protection, registration, education, the bill advocacy work, transportation, etc. So you're going to get that one in your email box, and I hope that you'll, click on that and share the video, share the information, and sign up to be part of one of the subcommittees, and you'll see all of them listed. Okay. And right now, let's take a look. If you've got, you can either do it on your computer if you know how to get to another web browser on your computer, well, just leaving this up, and go to ohvotes.org. Or if you're on a cell phone, you go to ohvotes.org and you will see this lovely screen. And the screen has 3 big red buttons that say, check my registration, and a link to register to vote, and a pledge to vote. And I'm going to ask everybody to check your registration, and you may all be registered, but check it right now so you know how it works. And then I'm going to ask you to press the button that says pledge to vote. We do that? ohvotes.org.
Great little website.
It's a great little website. And this also counts because we've got, you know, various granting agencies who want to know how many people check, how many people pledge. And this will help us out with that. So check it right now, see if you're registered, and then hit that button that says pledge to vote and fill that out right now. While we're doing that, if there's any other questions you have, you can unmute yourself and ask them, or put them in the chat box. I see a couple people signing up. Yes. All right. And yes, education and election protection work. Sign up for the committee, because we have the ACLU folk on there, we have Ohio Voice on there, we have Ohio Votes on there. We're all Common Cause is on there. We're all working together in this coalition. And yes, You the Vote is part of this and supporting this from our end with a grant. So Susan's and my work is being supported by You the Vote in this. So it's all part of the coalition. Registered, great. Registered, good. And now hit the pledge button and pledge to vote. Let me know if you pledge to vote.
And Carol Anderson, one of the persons that was on the video we saw, said that she's a historian and an activist, and she said that she checks her registration once a week. So I think that because there's such an effort to suppress the vote, and since it's so simple, that we should all probably just check it once a week.
Scroll down a little for the pledge button, Lori, and you'll see it. It's right under the register to vote one. When you see the screen and you see 3 big red buttons. I have to do checking my registration weekly as well, because with Van Becelaere, I have a space in my name. I have a space in my name that doesn't show up on the registration polls, even though my Social Security card has a space. So I'm one of those people, like Mr. Del Rey in the video, that has to check theirs. Okay, Eileen got no results, so you need to follow through. And after the end of this video or this presentation, I can walk you through to make sure that that you're okay. All right. Okay. And thanks. All right. And everybody else is working on this as well. So for those of you that have checked and those of you that have pledged, absolutely wonderful, and thank you so much for being here. I'm going to close with a little statement by Dorothy Day, the famous activist. And then those of you that are found that you weren't registered or have some issues with that, stay on the line and we'll work through those. But Dorothy Day said, people say, what is the sense of our small effort? They cannot see that we must lay one brick at a time and take one step at a time, because a pebble cast into a pond causes ripples that spread in all directions. And each one of our thoughts, our words, and our deeds is like that. And no one, she says, has a right to sit down and feel hopeless, because there is too much work to do. And so I want to thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And I just feel like the more